بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome everyone to our second class in the Ibn al-Jazari or the Muqaddimah al-Jazariyyah course. Inshallah, in our second class we'll be covering a very wide range of verses and many different topics. Most of them are just notes regarding how to pronounce certain words in the Quran. And then the last half, inshallah, we'll be discussing the rules of Noon and the rules of Mad. So last class, we took from verses 9 to 26, which was the makharij of the huruf and the sifat of the huruf as well. This class, inshallah, we'll be trying to cover all the way from verse 27 all the way up to verse 72, inshallah. So to begin where we left off, Ibn al-Jazari, under the bab of tajweed, he starts off by saying, وَالْأَخْذُ بِالتَّجْوِيدِ حَتْمٌ لَازِمُ مَنْ لَمْ يُصَحِّحِ الْقُرْآنَ آثِيمُ. He says that performing or using tajweed is something that is absolutely obligatory. حَتْمٌ لَازِمُ مَنْ لَمْ يُصَحِّحِ الْقُرْآنَ آثِيمُ. Whoever does not correctly pronounce the words of the Quran, they are in error. And this does not mean that a person gets sin if they cannot read, but it means that if a person is incorrectly pronouncing letters and words in the Quran, we cannot say that their recitation is something that is passable, something that they should be teaching other people with. Anyone who reads the Quran should try their best to perfect every one of the letters, to avoid falling into fatal error where they may change the meaning of a verse by mispronouncing certain words. Then he explains why we recite the Quran with tajweed, and he says, لِأَنَّهُ بِهِ الْإِلَهُ أَنزَلَ وَهَكَذَا مِنْهُ إِلَيْنَا وَصَالًا. Because when Allah Azza wa Jal sent down the Quran, لِأَنَّهُ بِهِ الْإِلَهُ أَنزَلَ, Allah Azza wa Jal sent down the Quran with this type of recitation. Part of the miracle of the Quran is that when people hear it and it's being recited correctly, it is very pleasing to the ears. People want to listen to it. وَهَكَذَا مِنْهُ إِلَيْنَا وَصَلًا. And that is how we received it from him subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way Allah Azza wa Jal instructed Jibreel to recite, the way he recited the Prophet Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ recited to his companions, and the way we learn from his companions up to the present day. Then he also says, وَهُوَ أَيْضًا حِلْيَةُ التِّلَاوَةِ وَزِينَةُ الْأَدَاءِ وَالْقِرَاءَةِ. Reciting with tajweed is also like the beautification, the adornment of the recitation. It is also beautification when you are delivering and reciting the Quran. Reciting correctly is a way to beautify the Quran. Tajweed with mad and ghunna and correct makharij, and the correct length for the letters. All of this is ways that we beautify the recitation of the Quran. And there is a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, مَنْ لَمْ يَتَغَنَّ بِالْقُرْآنِ فَلَيْسَ مِنَّا. Whoever does not, although the word sing is used, it means to recite in a very eloquent, beautiful voice. Whoever does not do this with the Quran, they are not from us. So it is from the regular practice to beautify the recitation of the Quran through tajweed. And then finally he says, وَهُوَ إِعْطَاءُ الْحُرُوفِ حَقَّهَا مِنْ كُلِّ صِفَاتٍ وَمُسْتَحَقَّهَا. He says tajweed is giving each letter its due right with regards to its sifat that it has, min kulli sifatin wa mustahaqqaha, and also those which it earns, such as if a letter is in a certain place where because of the haraka on it, it will either be mufakham or muraqqaq. So does it deserve the tafkhim or the tarqiq? Or if the noon with sukoon is in a certain place, does it deserve extra ghunna or does it deserve idhar? This is what tajweed is, to make sure you are giving each letter its correct intrinsic sifat and also the sifat that appear in certain scenarios, that you're applying them correctly in the correct place. And he goes on to say, وَرَدُّ كُلِّ وَاحِدٍ لِأَصْلِهِ وَاللَّفْظُ فِي نَظِيرِهِ كَمِثْلِهِ. And you are returning each letter to its origin. You are making sure that each letter is coming out from its correct makhraj. You are not altering the makhraj of the letter. وَاللَّفْظُ فِي نَظِيرِهِ كَمِثْلِهِ. And if the same letter is coming out again, it'll be exactly the same. You will not pronounce ta one way and then the next time the ta appears, it gets pronounced a different way. Each time you are pronouncing the letter, it is being replicated exactly the same as it needs to be in each case. مُكَمِّلًا مِنْ غَيْرِ مَا تَكَلُّفِ. And this word can be read as مُكَمِّلًا or مُكَمَّلًا. مُكَمِّلًا means that you are completing. مُكَمَّلًا means that the letter was made complete without any extra hardship on your end. Some people, they make the error of assuming that when you're reading with tajweed, it requires a lot of effort, a lot of straining, a lot of overemphasizing the letters. This is not true. In Arabic, we say all the words or all the letters are tried to be made as easy as possible. Part of the Arabic language is that the letters flow very easily off of the tongue and out of the lips. بِاللُّطْفِ فِي النُّطْقِ بِلَا تَعَسُّفِ. With a light pronunciation, without any hardship, without any difficulty when you're pronouncing the letters. وَلَيْسَ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ تَرْكِهِ إِلَّا رِيَاضَةُ امْرِئٍ بِفَكِّهِ. And there is nothing between you and between leaving off tajweed except إِلَّا رِيَاضَةُ امْرِئٍ بِفَكِّهِ, except making sure that you practice with your mouth. رِيَاضَةُ امْرِئٍ بِفَكِّهِ, the practice of a person using his jaw. In other words, he's saying that as long as you practice, you're going to get good at it. But if you leave off practicing, then it will always be difficult for you to pronounce the letters and to recite with tajweed correctly. So that was Ibn al-Jazari's short little introduction as to why tajweed is important and why everyone should try and beautify the recitation. Now he's going to go into sort of a list of common mistakes with certain words in the Quran. And the reason why Ibn al-Jazari rahimahullah mentions this chapter is because he was in an environment where he saw people from many different parts of the Islamic world, and they all had different ways of, when it comes to dialects, languages, and each of them had certain mistakes in their pronunciation. So Ibn al-Jazari rahimahullah made note of this, and he put together the most common words that he found people often fall into error whenever they are pronouncing them. So he begins by saying, فَرَقِّقًا مُسْتَفِيلًا مِنْ أَحْرُوفِي وَحَاذِرًا تَفْخِيمَ لَفْظِ الْآلِفِ. This is a base rule that applies throughout the whole Quran. فَرَقِّقًا مُسْتَفِيلًا مِنْ أَحْرُوفِي. Always do tarqiq of any letters that have the sifa of istifal, which we took last week when we were taking the sifat of the huruf. Anytime a letter is mustafilun, it will always be muraqqaq, and we'll explain that a bit more in a few slides. And he says, وَحَاذِرًا, and beware, be cautious of تَفْخِيمَ لَفْظِ الْأَلِفِ. Beware of mistakenly doing tafkhim of the alif. And we'll show you examples where the alif is fat and where the alif is skinny. But in Arabic, the alif relies upon the letter that comes before it, as we'll see just now. So he's warning you to avoid the mistake of always making your alif fat. The alif is dependent on what comes before it. Now he gives us a list of a few words to watch out for, to watch out in meaning that we don't want to do tafkhim of these letters. Wa hamza. So he says, watch out for the hamza in these words. Alhamdu, a'udhu, ihdina, Allahu. So he says, watch out for the hamza in the word alhamdu, a'udhu, ihdina, Allahu. Because a person who is not an Arabic speaker, they may say Alhamdu, A'udhu, Ihdina, Allahu. This is making the sound too round and fat. Hamza is one of the letters of istifal, so it's going to be skinny. Alhamdu, A'udhu, Ihdina. Then he says, Thumma lama, and also watch out for the lam in the words Lillahi, lana, وَلْيَتَلَطَّفْ وَعَلَى اللَّهِ وَلَضْ. So look out for the lam in the word lillahi. The lam at the beginning as well as the lam in the middle, they're going to be thin and skinny. Lana, not Allah, Allah, lana. That would make the lam fat. Lana. وَلْيَتَلَطَّفْ, يَتَلَطَّفْ, not يَتَلَطَّفْ, la, round, la, skinny. وَعَلَى اللَّهِ وَلَضْ, and this is part of the word وَلَضَّالِينَ, but he cut it short because of the wazn, because of the scale of the poem. Don't say وَلَضْ, وَلَضْ, that's a round lam. Make it skinny. وَلَضْ, وَلَضَّالِينَ. Now he goes on to the next letter. وَالْمِيمَ min. Watch out for the meme in the word مَخْمَصَاتٍ وَمِن مَرَضٍ. So the meme in the word مَخْمَصَ, it's in a tricky position. The first meme has a fat kha that comes right after it. And the second meme is between two fat letters, sad and kha. So a person might mistakenly say مَخْمَصَ, مَخْمَصَ. This is making the meme fat. مَخْمَصَ, مَخْمَصَ. Make both memes skinny, and also watch out in the word marad, marad, because again the meme is followed by a fat ra and also a bod. You might mistakenly make the meme round and fat, but because the meme is from the letters of istifal, it's always going to be skinny. Then he goes on to the next letter. وَبَاءَ بَرْقٍ بَاطِلٍ بِهِمْ بِذِي. Watch out for the ba in these words. Don't say barqin, say bar, barqin. Ba, batilin, not batil. Bihim, bidhi. وَاحْرِصْ عَلَى الشِّدَّةِ وَالْجَهْرِ الَّذِي فِيهَا وَفِي الْجِيمِ. Here he says, also pay attention to the sifa of shidda and jahr that occurs in the ba, as well as وَفِي الْجِيمِ, such as in the words كَحُبِّ الصَّبْرِ رَبْوَةِ نِجْتُثَّتْ وَحَجِّ الْفَجْرِ. So here we want to emphasize the abrupt and loud sound of the jim and the ba. حُبِّ الصَّبْرِ رَبْوَةٍ اجْتُثَّتْ حَجِّ فَجْرِ. Because if you pronounce them weakly, the sound may disappear, may not be clear to the listener. If I just say fajri, fajri, it doesn't sound like a true dream. Fajri, fajri. Then he mentions a rule concerning all the letters of qalqala. وَبَيِّنًا مُقَلْقَالًا إِنْ سَكَنَا. You can say muqalqil or muqalqal, muqalqil. You are the one doing qalqala. Muqalqal, the letter is made to have qalqala in it. He says, clarify the qalqala in sakana, if the letters of qalqala have sukun on them. وَإِيَّاكُنْ فِي الْوَقْفِ كَانَ أَبْيَانًا. And if you are stopping on a word, the last letter of which is a letter of qalqala, it's going to be even clearer than if it was when you're just joining to the next word or it's in the middle of a word. And we'll have a slide for that in a bit. And finally, he ends off by saying, وَحَاءَ حَصْحَصَ أَحَطُّ الْحَقُّ. Watch out for the ha in the word حَصْحَصَ. Don't say حَصْحَصَ. This is a round ha. Ha is always skinny because it's from the letters of istifal. أَحَطُّ الْحَقُّ. Same thing. The ha is very close to the fat letters, so a person may mistakenly make it round and fat. And then finally, وَسِينَ مُسْتَقِيمِ يَسْقُ يَسْقُ. Watch out for the seen in these words. Don't make them fat. Don't make it fat because right after it is a fat letter. But we need to make sure we emphasize the thinness of the seen. يسقو يسقو. طيب, so we'll just look at some of the rules he described here, such as tarqiq and tafkhim, and then also the alif when it's going to be fat and skinny. So in the first dars, we took the two sifat of al-isti'la and al-istifal. We said the letters that are going to be musta'liya are 7. Khus, baght, qidh. These 7 letters are unanimously agreed upon that they're always going to be mufakham. They will never not be fat. Now, there are some opinions that say they have different levels of tafkhim according to the haraka. We won't get into that in this course, but for the most part, we say that these letters always have the sifa of tafkhim in them. Then the remaining letters are classified as being mustafila, thin letters, with the exception of 3 letters, alif, lam, and ra. If we look at the letter, for example, qaf versus kaf, qa versus ka. One of them is fat and round, the other one is thin and skinny. We can also say that the letters of isti'la are also the letters of tafkhim, and we can generally say the letters of istifal are the letters of tarqiq. And in a little bit, we're going to show you what are the cases where alif, lam, and ra are going to be fat or skinny. So the first thing we'll look at is the alif. So whenever the alif has a fat letter before it, it's going to be fat. So in the word khalidin, I have the small alif here, and there's a kha before it. Kha is one of the 7 fat letters. So I say kha, I don't say kha. Kha is skinny, kha is fat. Same thing, wal qa'imina, qa, wal dallina, minallahi. Although this belongs more to the rules of lam, which we'll take in a little bit. And then yura'una, not yura'una, ra'una. In all these cases, the alif is preceded by a fat letter, so it will also be fat in pronunciation. Whereas if it's preceded by a skinny letter, like in the word Mina Sama'i, mim is a skinny letter. So I'm not going to say Mina Sama'i, Mina Sama'i, ma versus ma. I can never make this alif fat because this mim will never be a fat letter. Same thing in the word an-nasi, an-nasi. I cannot say an-nasi because this noon is skinny, so the alif will also be skinny in pronunciation. Then we'll look at the examples of qalqala when stopping. As Ibn al-Jazari said, وَبَيِّنًا مُقَلْقِلًا إِن سَكَنَ وَإِن يَكُنْ فِي الْوَقْفِ كَانَ أَبْيَنًا. Some ulama refer to this type of qalqala as qalqala kubra, where you stop on the qalqala letter. It should be louder or stronger in sound compared to the qalqala that is in the middle of a word or is joined to the next word. So al-falaq, muhit, kasab, bahij, ahad, haqq, watab, al-hajj, ashad. This is qalqala kubra because I'm stopping on these letters. Inshallah, we're going to go on to the rules of tafkhim and tarqiq of the letter ra specifically. And Ibn al-Jazari puts a separate set of verses just for this letter because the rule is a little complicated. So he says, وَرَقِّقِ الرَّاءَ إِذَا مَا كُسِرَتْ كَذَاكَ بَعْدَ الْكَسْرِ حَيْثُ سَكَنَتْ. Do tarqiq of the ra anytime it has kasra. And this rule stands forever for all of the qurra in the entire Quran. Whenever the ra has a kasra on it, and I'm pronouncing that kasra, the ra can only be muraqqaq. Then he talks about the case when there isn't a haraka on the ra. What if there's a sukoon on the ra? كَذَاكَ بَعْدَ الْكَسْرِ حَيْثُ سَكَنَتْ. Also, if the ra has a sukoon and before it is a kasra, I will also do tarqiq of the ra, but with 2 conditions he's going to mention. إِن لَمْ تَكُنْ مِنْ قَبْلِ حَرْفِ اسْتِعْلَى. The condition is that the letter after the ra meaning the ra is not before a letter of isti'la of the 7 letters khus, ضغط, bil. Because if it has sukoon on it and there's kasra before it, but the letter after it is one of the 7 letters of isti'la, that ra is going to be fat. أو كانت الكسرة ليست أصلا. Or if the kasra that appears before the ra with sukoon is not original, then I'm not going to do tarqiq of the ra. And we'll show you some examples just now. And then finally, he gives us one word to pay attention to in the Quran. وَالْخُلْفُ فِي فِرْقٍ لِكَسْرٍ يُوجَدُ. And there is a difference of opinions over the word firqin because of the kasra that appears on the end of the qaf. Firqin, that's why there is the kasrin yujadu, because of the kasra there. That's why there is a khulf, a difference of opinion amongst the ulama, whether I should pronounce this ra with sukoon or with tafkhim or with tarqiq. And finally he says, وَأَخْفِي تَكْرِيرًا إِذَا تُشَدَّدُ. And whenever the ra has a shadda, try and limit or lower the amount of takreer that you do, which we talked about in the first class when we were talking about the sifa of takreer. Don't do excessive rolling of the R. Don't say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This is too much R's. You want to try and lower the amount of takreer that happens when the ra has a shadda on it. So now let's look at the cases Ibn al-Jazari talked about. We said at the beginning, he said the letter ra will always be muraqqaq if it has a kasra on it. And if it has a fatha or dhamma, it will always be mufakham. The only exception to this is if you're reading with Warsh via Al-Azraq, who has his own separate set of rules to follow. But in general, we say for everyone else, whenever I have a dhamma or a fatha on top of the ra, it's going to be fat, like in the word Ramadan, yansuru. Whereas if it has a kasra, it's going to be skinny, kareem, kareem. Now we're going to break down the cases where the ra, if it has sukoon, will it be muraqqaq or not? So we say the following 4 things have to happen. If the ra has a sukoon, either that sukoon can be original or it just appears because I'm stopping on the word. And before it is an original kasra, which is something that Ibn al-Jazari mentioned, or a ya with a sukoon. He doesn't mention this, but you can derive that from the verse that says a kasra before it. But we'll add this on, or a ya with sukoon, or a letter with sukoon on it, before which is a kasra. Like in the word hijr, I have a ra with sukoon, before that letter there's a sukoon on it, and then before that there is a kasra. And then there is not a letter of isti'la after it in the same word. And we'll show you that just now. If these 4 conditions are ticked off, then the ra will be muraqqaq. If any one of these conditions is lost, then the ra will be mufakham. So let's look at the examples that fulfill these conditions. Look at the word fir'aun. I have a ra with sukoon. Before it is an original kasra. And after it, there is not a letter of isti'la. Therefore, this ra is going to be muraqqaq. Fir'aun. Another example, the word hijr. I have a ra with sukoon. Before it is another letter with sukoon, and before that letter is a kasra. It fulfills the conditions, so I will say hijr if I stop on the word. Let's look at the word qadir. The ra has a sukoon, and before it is a ya with sukoon. Automatically it will be muraqqaq if I stop on the word. Similarly, in the word khayr, I have a ra with sukoon. Before it is a ya with sukoon. In the word dayr, same thing. If I stop on the word, I have a ra with sukoon and a ya with sukoon before it. So the ra is going to be muraqqaq. Well, let's look at some cases where the conditions are not fulfilled. If I look at the word irji'u, irji'u. Why am I not going to make this ra skinny? Because the kasra before it is not original. Anytime I have a hamzatul wasl at the beginning of a word, we say this haraka is not original. It's just there to help facilitate pronouncing the word. Likewise in the word alladhi irtada, alladhi irtada, this kasra is coming from the dhal, which is way before the ra. It's not part of the word, so it's not original. So in both these cases, the condition of the kasra being original is not fulfilled, so the ra is going to be mufakham. And then we have these words down here where there is a letter of isti'la that comes after the ra. So in the word irsada, I have a ra with sukoon. There is a kasra before it, but there is a fat letter right after it, one of the letters of isti'la. So this ra is going to be fat. Wa irsada, not wa irsada. Same thing in the word qirtas. There's a fat letter after it. And also in the word firqa. I have a qaf with fatha right after the ra. Even though there's a kasra before it, we say the fat letter overpowers it and it makes the ra fat. And here is the one word that Ibn al-Jazari rahimahullah mentioned. There is khulf over. That is in the word firqin kattawd al-azim in Surah Al-Shu'ara, ayah 63. The ulama say you can either read this word with tafkhim or tarqiq. Both are correct. So regarding the word firqin, as we said, scholars say it's best to read with tarqiq when joining to the next word because then the kasra appears. Firqin, so the cause of the fatness of the qaf is gone, so it's best to read with tarqiq. Whereas if I stopped on the word, because the kasra is gone and the qaf is like a full qaf, then I'm going to make it fat when I stop on it. Firqin. This is two opinions regarding the word firqin, as Ibn al-Jazari mentioned. Now, in the next set of verses, Ibn al-Jazari is also going to give us some precautions to take with regards to certain letters and words in the Quran as we come across them. So he begins by saying, وَفَخِّمِ اللَّامَ مِنِ اسْمِ اللَّهِ عَنْ فَتْحٍ أَوْ ضَمٍّ كَعَبْدُ اللَّهِ. Make the lam in lafzul jalala fat عن فتح أو ضم, if before it there is a fatha or a dhamma, ka, like in the word Abdullahi. So this dhamma before the word Allah made the lam fat. I didn't say Abdullahi, Abdullahi, and we'll explain that a bit more just now. And then he says وحرف الاستعلاء فخم وخصوصا لطباق أقوى نحو قال والعصا. The letters of isti'la make them fat, as we said before. وخصوصا, and specify or increase your tafkhim لطباق for the letters of إطباق أقوى because they are stronger. نحو, such as قال والعصا. These letters are letters, or the word qala is a letter of isti'la alone, but the word asa is a letter of isti'la and itbaq as well, so it's stronger than the qaf by itself. The rounding is more heavy in the letters of itbaq than it is in the letters of just isti'la. Then he goes on to mention a very important point whenever I'm doing partial merging. He says, وَبَيِّنِ الْإِطْبَاقَ مِنْ, and clarify the sifa of itbaq in the word ahattu, ahattu ma basatta. In this case, I'm merging the ta into the letter ta, but not completely. I'm keeping the sifa of itbaq here. If I did complete merging, it would sound like ahattu, ahattu. I need to keep the sifa of itbaq, ahattu, basatta. And then he mentions there's a word where there is khulf, wal khulfu bi nakhlukum waqa'. There's a difference of opinions in the word nakhlukum, which appears in Surah Mursalat, whether I should do complete merging or I should keep the sifa of isti'la in the letter qaf. We'll talk about that more just now. Now he gives a list of words to watch out for. وَاحْرِصْ عَلَى السُّكُونِ فِي جَعَلْنَا أَنْعَمْتَ وَالْمَغْضُوبِ مَعْ ضَلَلْنَا. Pay attention to the sukoon in the word ja'alna. Don't mistakenly merge it into the noon and you end up with the word ja'anna, ja'anna. And also don't put qalqala on the lam. Don't say ja'alna, 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 an'amta. Same thing. Don't say an'amta, an'amta. You want to make sure the noon and the meme have a complete non-qalqala sukoon with them. Same thing for the word wal maghdubi. Don't say maghdubi, maghdubi, wal maghdubi. Also the lam in the word dalalna. Make your lam clear with sukoon. Another note he gives us. وَخَلِّ الصِّنْفِتَاحَ مَحْذُورًا عَسَى خَوْفَ اشْتِبَاهِهِ بِمَحْظُورًا عَصَى. And beware or make your sifa of infitah clear in the word mahdhuran asa, the infitah of the letter dha, dhal, and the infitah of the letter sin. Otherwise, khawfa ishtibahihi, you need to be aware of it becoming similar to mahdhuran asa. See, the ra here is very close to the dhu here. And the sa here is very close to the sa here. Mahdhuran asa versus mahdhuran asa. The only thing that makes them different is the sifa of infitah, whereas these letters have the sifa of itbaq. And one final notice he gives us, وَرَاعِي شِدَّةً بِكَافٍ وَبِتَا. And take care of the sifa of shiddah, the abrupt sharp sound in the kaf and the ta, such as in the word kashirkikum wa tatawaffa fitnata. Because if you're too loose with it, you may create a kind of kha-like sound with the kaf. Shirkikum, shirkikum. You want to make the kaf sharp. Shirkikum, shirkikum. And the same thing for the ta, tatawaffa fitnata. So we'll look at some of the things that Ibn Jazari talks about in more detail. These last three verses are fairly clear. Watch out for the sukoon. Watch out for the thinness, the infitah of mahdhuran asa. And also watch out for the shidda in kaf and ta. We'll look at these top verses regarding tafkhim and itbaq. As he said before, وَفَخِّمِ اللَّامَ مِنِ اسْمِ اللَّهِ. Make the lam in lafzul jalala fat if there's a fatha or a dhamma before it. Huwallahu sayu'tina Allahu wa idh qalu Allahumma wa dhkuru Allah. Because there is a dhamma or a fatha before it, the word Allah is fat. Whereas if there was a kasra before it, Bismillahi, not Bismillahi, Bismillahi, Afillahi, Qulillahumma, not Qulillahumma. This kasra is making the lam and the alif that comes after it skinny. And as we mentioned before, the letters of itbaq are 4, sad, dad, ta, and dha, and all the remaining letters are the letters of infitah. As we said, itbaq is when the letter gets stuck to the top of the mouth during pronunciation, whereas infitah is when the letter does not stick to the mouth, it releases quickly. If we compare the sound ba versus da, ba versus da. And then here are 4 words in the Quran where a letter of itbaq is getting merged into the next letter, but I have to keep the sifa of itbaq. Ahattu, basatta, farrattum, farrattu. If I did complete idgham, this would sound like basatta, basatta. The ta completely disappeared. but I have to keep that sifa of itlaq. Basatta. And then we talked about the word nakhluqkum in Surah Al-Mursalat. Alam nakhluqkum min ma'in mahin. There's two opinions for the scholars. The most predominant opinion, and the way that virtually all mushafs are printed, is to do complete idgham and the qaf disappears. The lam gets joined straight to the kaf. Alam nakhluqkum, luqkum. But if I kept the sifa of isti'la of the qaf, I would say alam nakhluqkum, luqkum. I would keep that roundness of the qaf, and this is a second permissible opinion which some reciters also recite with. And this applies to all 10 qurra. With the exception, some of the scholars say, to as-Susi, if he's reading with idgham kabir, he does not keep any sifa of the qaf. Now we're going to go on to the short set of verses regarding merging letters together. Ibn al-Jazari says, وَأَوَّلَيْ مِثْلٍ وَجِنْسٍ إِنْ سَاكَنْ أَدْغِمْ كَقُرْ رَبِّي وَبَلَّا وَأَبٍ فِي يَوْمِ مَعْ قَالُوا وَهُمْ وَقُلْ نَعَمْ سَبِّحْهُ لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَ فَالْتَقَمْ. Ibn al-Jazari here says, when the first letter between two mutamathilain, two identical letters, wa jinsin, or two mutajanisain, two similar letters, in sakan, if the first letter has a sukoon, adghim, then you're going to do idgham, such as ka qur rabbi. So here the lam is very similar to the ra, and it has sukoon, so I merged it. Wa, and also balla. This lam has sukoon, the next lam had a fatha, they're identical, so I merged it into one lam with shadda. And then he gives us a notice of cases where idgham does not happen, where he says wa abin, which means to make clear, fi yawmi. I don't merge this ya into this ya, because this ya, the first one, is a letter of med. I cannot say fi yawmi. I have to make the ya clear and a regular med letter. Fi yawmi. And also qalu wahum. I don't say qalu wahum. There's no merging happening here because the first letter is a letter of med. And also in the word qul na'am, I don't merge the lam into the noon. I don't say qul na'am, qul na'am. The lam is clear. Also in the example of sabbihu, there's there's a light ha, then a heavy ha. I don't merge these together, I keep them separate. Also in la tuzigh quluba, la tuzigh quluba, I don't merge the ghain into the qaf. And finally the word faltaqam, I don't merge this lam into the ta. I don't say fattaqam, because this lam is not lam shamsiyya. This is just a regular lam as part of the verb. So mutamathilain letters, identical letters, are letters that have the same makhraj and the same sifat as well. In other words, the same letters appearing twice. Two lams, two kafs, two qafs. This is called identical, al-mutamathilain. Mutajanisain is where they come from the same makhraj, but they have different sifat, like dal and ta, or dha and dhal. They come from the same makhraj, but their sifat are different. And the early scholars only had these two categories. You either say the letters are identical, or you say they are similar, they are mutajanis. Later on, scholars decided to make it more specific, and they added a third group called mutaqaribain, where they say the letters have a different makhraj and different sifat as well, but they may be close to each other. Ibn al-Jazari, he doesn't mention this group, he just says وَأَوَّلَيْ مِثْلٍ وَجِنْسٍ مُتَمَاثِلَيْن or مُتَجَانِسَيْن, but we can say that mutaqaribain fits under the category of mutajanisain. In other words, we're saying either the letters are identical to each other or they are similar to each other. Could be from the same makhraj or from a different makhraj. So let's look at the examples he gave us, such as bel and la. The bel, the lam had sukoon, the second lam had a fatha, so they became one lam with shadda. Bella. And we said we say that every letter with shadda is actually two letters. The first one has sukoon, the second one has a haraka. In the example he gave us for mutajanisain, according to his definition, and also this would be the opinion of those who put lam, ra, and noon into one makhraj, or if you want, you can call them mutaqaribain, that's fine as well. I have the word qul, lam with sukoon, and right after it, the word rabbi. So they're either the same makhraj or very close to each other, according to whichever opinion you take. So I'm going to convert this lam into a ra, first of all. And then it's as if I have two ra's meeting, ra with sukoon, ra with fatha. So it becomes a one ra with shadda. Qur Rabbi, Qur Rabbi. The lam has completely disappeared because I converted it into a ra, then I merged it into the next ra. And then here are the words he tells us to watch out for where idgham is not performed. Fi yawmi, even though these are identical, because the first letter is a letter of med, I don't merge it into the next one. The word qalu wa hum, first letter is a letter of med, so I do not merge it into the waw. In the word sabbihu, the first letter is ha and the second letter is ha, and we say the rule is that the throat letters are never merged into each other. We don't merge them into each other, at least in the 10 canonical qira'at. We keep them separate. Sabbihu, sabbihu. Or something similar where I have a ghayn and then a qaf, which is very close to it. Ghayn is from the throat and then qaf is slightly above it. I don't say la tuzigh qulubana. I need to make the ghayn clear. La tuzigh qulubana. And then whenever I have a lam in a verb that meets something other than a ra, such as qul na'am, or in the word faltaqam, this lam is not lam shamsiyya. Because if I had, for example, fattaliyati dhikra, fattaliyati, that is lam shamsiyya, so it gets merged into the ta. But this lam here in the word faltaqam is part of the verb, so I have to pronounce this lam clearly. Now we go on to one of the more complex chapters of the MATN, which is differentiating between ra and bod. And that Ibn al-Jazari is going to list all the places or all the root words that have ra in them in the Quran. So this is a slightly long chapter. We'll try and simplify it as much as we can. So he starts off by saying, وَالضَّادَ بِاسْتِطَالَةٍ وَمَخْرَجِ مَيِّزْ مِنَ الرَّاءِ. The ضاد has the sifa of istitala, which we took in the first class. And also its makhraj is different from the dha, which we also took more in the first class. مَيِّزْ مِنَ الرَّاءِ. Use the istitala and use the makhraj of the ضاد to make it different from the dha. If you put these two sifa, you put the sifa and the makhraj together, there's no way you can confuse them. Don't say وَلَا الضَّالِينَ وَلَا الضَّالِينَ, because you're using the correct makhraj, the sides of the tongue pushing up against the top of the mouth, and the sifa of istitala, and you're making it different from the dha sound, which is using the tip of the tongue and the edge of the top teeth. Now, after he gives us this, he's going to list off all of the root words that have a ra in them. Now, keep in mind when he lists them, sometimes he's referring to the actual word, but in most cases, he's referring to the root, and then the derivatives in the Quran can be many. So maybe he says the word hifli, like in this line here. He doesn't actually mean the word hifli, he means everything that's derived from these three letters. Hifli, yahfadun, hafidha, such words like this. So it could appear many more times in the Quran, and we'll try and give you an approximate number each time the word appears. So he starts off by saying, وَكُلُّهَا تَجِي, and all of the dha words are, all of them come in fi الظَّعْنِ ظِلُّ الظُّهْرِ عُظْمُ الْحِفْظِ أَيْقِظْ وَأَنظِرْ عظم ظهر اللفظ ظاهر لظى شواظ كظم ظلم اغلظ ظلام ظفر انتظر ظما أظفر ظنا كيف جاء. You can put this in brackets if you have a printed copy. This is one expression. ظنا كيف جاء. The word ظن, however it appears. وعظ سواعظين. This also goes in brackets. ظل النحل زخرف سوا وظلت ظلتم وبروم ظلوا كالحجر ظلت شعرا ظلوا يظللن محظورا مع المحتضر وكنت فظا وجميع النظر إلا بويل هل وأولى ناظرة. This part here, وجميع النظر up to ناظرة, this also goes in brackets. This is one expression or one sentence. He's talking about one specific thing. والغيظ للرعد وهود قاصرة. Also the word غيظ, don't confuse it with the place in Surah Al-Ra'd and Surah Hud, which we'll look at just now. And finally, والحظ للحظ على الطعام. This is also in brackets. وفي ظنين الخلاف سامي. And in the word ظنين, there is khilaf. So now we're going to go through each of these words quickly. We'll give you a rough number for how many times they appear in the Quran, as well as a brief explanation as to what the words mean. So the first word he says, ظَعْنِ, this appears only once in the entire Quran, and that's in Surah An-Nahl, يَوْمَ ظَعْنِكُمْ, which means the day of your travel. ظَعْن means to travel. Next word he says, ظِل, appears approximately 33 times in the Quran. ظِل meaning shade. Al-Dhuhr, which means the middle of the day, only appears twice in the Quran. مِنَ الظَّهِيرَةِ, and then وَحِينَ تُظْهِرُونَ. Then the word عُظْمِ, he means the root here and all of its derivatives. So anything that has to do with greatness, such as the word عظيم. This appears approximately 113 times in the Quran. Then the word al-hifzi, all of the derivatives of it, which means to preserve something, appears 44 times in the Quran. Then the word ayqiz, which means to wake up or wakefulness, this appears only once in the Quran. That's in Surah Al-Kahf. وَتَحْسَبُهُمْ أَيْقَاظًا وَهُمْ رُقُودٌ. And then we have the word anzir, which means to delay or to put off something. This appears approximately 22 times in the Quran. Next we have the word azm, which means bone. This appears approximately 15 times in the Quran. Then the word dhahr, which is the back of something, also approximately 15 times in the Quran. Then the word al-lafzi, which appears only once in the Quran. Al-laf meaning the expression, or to a phrase or to express something, and that's in Surah Qaf, ما يلفظ من قول إلا لديه رقيب عتيد. Those were the first 10 words which appeared in the first line when he said في الظَّعْنِ ظِلُّ الظُّهْرِ عُظْمُ الْحِفْظِ أيقظ وأنظر عظم ظهر اللفظ. Now we're on to the second set of 10. The word ظاهر, it actually has a number of meanings in the Quran. ظاهر can mean the outside of something. It can also mean to gain victory over someone. And it can also refer to the act of zihar, where the Arabs would swear they would not go near their wives. They would make themselves impermissible to their wives. All of these meanings from this root ظاهر appear approximately 42 times in the Quran. Then we have the word lava, which is a word used to describe hellfire. This appears twice in the Quran. كلا إنها لظى, and then also in Surah Al-A'la, نارا تلظى. Then we have the word shuwaz, which refers to smokeless fire. And this only appears once in the Quran in Surah Ar-Rahman. يرسل عليكما شواظ من نار. Then we have the word kazm, which means you try and contain your rage or your anger. This appears approximately 6 times in the Quran. Then we have the word zalam and all of its derivatives. The word zalam meaning to oppress or to wrong, zalimin and so on. This appears approximately 282 times in the Quran. Then we have the word ughluz, which means to be harsh. This also and all of its derivatives appear approximately 13 times in the Quran. Then we have the word zalam, which is the opposite of light, darkness. This also appears approximately 26 times in the Quran. We have the word dhufr, which is the hoof of the animal, which appears only once in the Quran. وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ هَادُوا حَرَّمْنَا كُلَّ ذِي ظُفُرٍ. Those who, the Jews were forbidden to eat the cloven foot animal. Then we have the word intazir, which means to wait, to be patient for something. This appears approximately 14 times in the Quran. Then we have the word dhama, which is thirst, and this appears approximately 3 times in the Quran. So that was the next set of 10. Now we're going on to the next verse, which starts off adfara. The word adfara, which means to gain victory over, only appears once in the Quran. من بعد أن أظفركم عليهم. The word dhanna, which means to think or to assume, and all of its derivatives appear approximately 69 times in the Quran. The word idh, which means to give admonishment, and all of its derivatives appear approximately 25 times in the Quran. And he also says siwa'idina, which means do not confuse it with the word idin, which comes in the ayah الَّذِينَ جَعَلُوا الْقُرْآنَ عِضِينَ. So don't confuse idh or maw'idha with the word idin. Then he mentions the word dhalla when he says ظَلَّ النَّحْلِ زُخْرُفٍ سَوَى. The word dhalla appears a total of 9 times, but he divides them. So the word dhalla, which means to remain in a certain state or to stay a certain way, appears twice, once in Surah Nahl, then in Surah Zukhruf. Then the word dhalta appears once, the word dhaltum also once, the word dhallu appears twice, once in Surah Ar-Rum and then in Surah Al-Hijr. The word dhallat and nadhallu, each of them appear once, both of them in Surah Shu'ara, and then yadhlalna also only appears once in the Quran. Then we have the word mahdhura only once, the word muhtadhir only once, the word fadhan only once in the ayah وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ. And the word an-nadhar and all of its derivatives appear 86 times. Mahdhura is something that is prohibited. وَمَا كَانَ عَطَاءُ رَبِّكَ مَحْظُورًا. The word muhtadhir refers to someone who builds an enclosure for animals out of dried up twigs and that and stuff like that. Allah Azza wa Jalla says فَكَانُوا كَهَشِيمِ الْمُحْتَضِرِ. The word fadhan refers to someone who is harsh. Nadhar refers to sight. And then he also says, when he mentions nadhar, إِلَّا بِوَيْلٌ هَلْ وَأُولَى نَاظِرَةٍ. But beware of the place in Surah Waylun, meaning Waylul al-Mutaffifin. Nadra also appears in Surah Insan as well. Don't say Nadra. Nadra, in this case, Nadra. Nadratan Na'im in Surah Mutaffifin, and then in Surah Insan, وَلَقَاهُمْ نَضْرَةً وَسُرُورًا. That's with Dad. And then in Surah Qiyamah, the first place, وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاضِرَةٌ with Dad. And then the second place is with Dha. إِلَى رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. So do not confuse the Dad and the Dha in those surahs. Al-Ghayru also meaning rage or anger. This appears approximately 11 times in the Quran. and do not confuse it with the word تغيض in Surah Al-Ra'd, or the word غيض in Surah Al-Hud, in Surah Hud. Then the word al-hazzu, which means your portion, your assigned portion of something, appears approximately 7 times in the Quran. And don't confuse it with the word tahudduna or yahuddu. That's when he says wal-hazzu lal-haddu ala at-ta'ami, because these 2 words, tahuddu, yahuddu, appear in the Quran whenever talking about feeding the poor. وَلَا تَحُضُّونَ وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. And then finally, the last word he mentions is dhaneen, which appears once in the Quran, and that's in Surah Takwir. وَمَا هُوَ عَلَى الْغَيْبِ بِضَنِينٍ or بِضَنِينٍ. Because in the last verse he says, وَفِي ظَنِينٍ الْخِلَافُ سَامِي. In the word dhaneen, the khilaf is well known and established. So the 10 qurra, the 10 qira'at, there are 2 sides of them. On one side, we have those who recite with dad, which is the majority of reciters. So in the case of Hafs, we would say, وَمَا هُوَ عَلَى الْغَيْبِ بِضَنِينٍ. Dhaneen is someone who is bakhil, someone who is miserly. Dhaneen is someone who is accused of lying. So if you say with dha, it means he is someone who is accused of lying. If you say with dad, it's someone who is miserly or someone who is holding back things. And amongst the 10 qurra, Ibn Kathir, Abu Amr, Kisa'i, and Ruwais wa Ya'qub, they read this word in Surah Takwir with dha. So that covers the chapter of dad and dha. To end off this, Ibn Jazari mentions certain places in the Quran where dad and dha meet along with other letters, and we want to avoid confusing them. So he says, وَإِن تَلَاقَيَ الْبَيَانُ لَازِمُ. If they meet, the dad and the dha meet, al-bayanu lazimu, making them clear is obligatory, such as in أَنْقَضَ ظَهْرَكَ, أَنْقَضَ ظَهْرَكَ. The dad and the dha are meeting. يَعَضُّ الظَّالِمُ, يَعَضُّ الظَّالِمُ, dad and dha are meeting. You have to make the dad clear and distinct from the dha. Here's a word that doesn't have a dha in it, but it's important to make the dad clear as well. وَالضُّرَّ مَعْ وَعَوْتَ. The dha is meeting a ta. وَعَوْتَ. And then in the word أَفَضْتُمُ, make your dad clear. Don't merge it completely into the ta. And then finally he says, وَصَفِّهَا, and make the ha in these words clear. جِبَاهُهُمْ عَلَيْهِمُ. Because the ha is a light letter, it might accidentally get melted away if you do not pronounce it clear enough. So those chapters cover just certain words you have to pay attention to with regards to tafkhim and tarqiq and pronouncing them clearly. The next chapters will now cover more of the rules of recitation, particularly with regards to noon and med. So now we're going to break into the rules of noon and meme. We'll read the verses all together and then we'll take each one piece by piece. So under noon and meme, he starts off by saying, وَأَظْهِرِ الْغُنَّةَ مِن نُونٍ وَمِن مِيمٍ إِذَا مَا شُدِّدَ. Make the ghunna clear in the noon and the meme whenever they have shadda on them. وَأَخْفِيًا الْمِيمَ إِن تَسْكُنْ بِغُنَّةٍ لَدَى بَاءٍ عَلَى الْمُخْتَارِ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْأَدَى. And do ikhfa of the meme if it has sukoon, and this will be with ghunna, when it meets lada ba'in, when it meets a ba' ala al-mukhtari min ahli al-ada, according to the chosen opinion of those who recite and teach the Quran. وَأَظْهِرَنْهَا, and make the meme clear, عِنْدَ بَاقِ الْأَحْرُفِ, with the remaining letters in the Arabic alphabet. وَاحْذَرْ لَدَى وَاوٍ وَفَاءً تَخْتَفِي, and beware of the waw and fa, whenever the meme meets them, beware of doing ikhfa, because these letters are not letters that meme has ikhfa done on it. Now he goes on to rules of noon. وَحُكْمُ تَنْوِينٍ وَنُونٍ يُلْفَى. The rule of tanween and noon, with sukoon of course, are found in إِظْهَارٌ إِدْغَامٌ وَقَلْبٌ إِخْفَى. These are the four well-known rules of noon sakina and tanween: إظهار, إدغام, إقلاب or qalb as he calls it, and إخفاء. The first one, فَعِنْدَ حَرْفِ الْحَلْقِ أَظْهِرْ. Whenever the noon meets one of the 6 throat letters, أظهر, do إظهار, make it clear. وَالدَّغِمْ, and do إدغام. فِي اللَّامِ وَالرَّا لَا بِغُنَّةٍ لَازِمْ. Do إدغام into lam and ra without غنة as part of this rule. لَازِمَ meaning to stay with it. وَأَدْغِمًا بِغُنَّةٍ فِي, and do إدغام with غنة in في يُؤْمِنُ, the letters ya, waw, mim, noon, إِلَّا بِكِلْمَةٍ, except if they occur in one word together, كَدُنْيَا عَنْوَنُ, like in the word dunya or in the word عَنْوَنُ. And عَنْوَنُ is not in the Quran, but he just chose it to show an example of noon meeting waw in the same word. And finally, وَالْقَلْبُ عِنْدَ الْبَابِ غُنَّةٍ, do iqlab whenever the noon meets a ba, and do it with a ghunna. كذا الإخفاء لدى باقي الحروف أخذا, and ikhfa applies to all the remaining letters whenever a noon sakina with tanween, a noon sakina or tanween meets them, you will do ikhfa. So now we'll take each of these verses in a bit more detail. The first thing he said was to make the ghunna of the noon and the meme clear whenever they have shadda. And we say the highest level of ghunna is whenever a noon or meme have shadda. Like in the word وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ سَلَّمْ فِي الْيَمِّ وَلَا تَخَافِي. The ghunna is clear and strong. Then we go into the rules of meme sakina. The first one he mentioned is to do ikhfa shafawi, and that's because the ba comes from a place that is essentially the same as the meme, so it's difficult to pronounce it. So instead we do ikhfa shafawi, where we elongate the m sound, such as in فَحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ وَكَلْبُهُمْ بَاسِطٌ يَوْمَ هُمْ بَارِزُونَ تَرْمِيهِمْ بِحِجَارَةٍ. And then for the other letters, we do إظهار shafawi, which is to pronounce clearly. Anything that is not a ba or a meme, and the meme with sukoon meets them, you have to pronounce it clearly. And we beware of mistakenly doing ikhfa shafawi with the letters waw and fa. Even though they are from the lips, we don't add any extra ghunna with them. So for example, I have the word hum fiha, hum fiha. I don't say hum fiha. This is incorrect. Am lam tunzirhum la yu'minun. These are also examples of idhar, because the meme is meeting a letter that is not lam or is not that is not ba or is not meme. So I pronounce the meme clearly. Also here we have the example of meme meeting waw. أيديهم وما خلفهم. I don't say أيديهم وما. There's no reason to add extra ghunna here. Now we go on to the rules of noon sakina, the rules of noon with sukoon. The first one is al-idhar al-halqi, whenever I have noon plus one of the 6 throat letters. Because these letters are so far away from the noon, there's no reason for me to add any extra ghunna. The second rule is that of idgham, which is broken into idgham with ghunna and idgham without ghunna, according to what Ibn al-Jazari said in the poem. So the first one is idgham kamil without ghunna, when I take the noon with sukoon or the tanween and I merge it into the ra or the lam, and no trace of it remains whatsoever in the 10 qira'at from the root of al-Shatibi at the very least. Because these letters are so close to the noon, it's hard to pronounce the noon clearly, so it's easier to just merge it into the next letter. So for example, min ladunhu becomes mil ladunhu, fitnatal lahum, mir rabbika, ghafurur rahim. In all these cases, I've completely merged the noon or the tanween into the next letter. Idgham with ghunna, on the other hand, is where I merge into the next letter, but I maintain the nasalization of the ghunna. And this applies to the letters yu'minu, ya, waw, mim, noon, as Ibn Jazari says. And it only occurs if the waw or the ya are in the word following the noon, not when they are in the same word. So example, sinatun wala nawm, shay'in wakil, wujuhun yawma'idhin khayran yarah. And then for the examples where a waw or ya appears in the same word, we have only 4 words in the Quran: qinwan, sinwan, dunya, bunyan. Even though I have a noon with sukoon and there's a waw or a ya after it, because it is in the same word, there's no idgham happening. I don't say sinwan or dunya, binwan, and we call this idhar mutlaq, general idhar. The third rule that we have is iqlab, which means to flip into something else. This is whenever the noon with sukoon meets a ba, I'm going to convert that noon into a meme and then do ikhfa shafawi. It should be noted that I want to keep my lips together when I do this, and there is no gap left between them, but there is a difference of opinion over this matter. Depends on what you recite to your shaykh. Either way is fine. This is what your lips should look like, according to one opinion. If I have the word min ba'di, it becomes min ba'di, burika, bihum, sami'un basir. In all these cases, I have a noon or tanween. It's meeting the ba. I flip it into a meme, then I do ikhfa shafawi. And the final rule for noon is al-ikhfa al-haqiqi, which is ikhfa, which is not shafawi, but ikhfa that applies to the noon specifically. Ikhfa means to hide. And what's happening is that if I pronounce a noon regularly, my tongue is going to go up and hit the top of my mouth. If I take the word in and I pause on the last letter, where do I feel my tongue? I feel it touching the top of my mouth. If I say the same word again, but this time I leave a slight gap, my tongue gets very close, but it does not touch the top of my mouth, the result will be ikhfa. This is hiding the true makhraj of the noon. And this applies to the remaining 15 letters. After we take out the letters of idhar and idgham and iqlab, the letters that remain, I will perform ikhfa with them. And the ulama say that this is a place between idhar and idgham. I'm not pronouncing it clear, but I'm also not merging it into the next letter. So some short examples. Min duni faka'san dihaqa an tabaq kashajaratin tayyiba al-munzilun nafsan zakiyya anfusikum taba'an fahal. In all these cases, I am pronouncing the noon without touching my tongue, the tip of my tongue to the top of my mouth. Now for the final section for today, we will look at the rules of med. Ibn al-Jazari says, وَالْمَدُّ لَازِمٌ وَوَاجِبٌ آتَى وَجَائِزٌ وَهْوَ وَقَصْرٌ ثَبَاتًا. Med is divided into lazim and wajib, ata, that has come, wajaizun, and also med that is jaiz. Wahwa wa qasrun thabata, and it, meaning med, as well as qasr, which means the opposite of med, which means to pronounce at a natural length of just 2 haraka. Both of these are confirmed or are firm in the recitation. Then he breaks down each of the categories. فَلَازِمٌ, med lazim is what? إن جاء بعد حرف مد ساكين حالين وبالطول يمد. لازم is whenever I have a letter of mad and after this letter of mad comes a sukun halaini, meaning in both cases, whether I'm stopping on the word or I'm joining to the next word. Another way of saying this is that it's an original sukun. Sakinu halaini, the letter that comes after the letter of mad has a sukun. وَبِالطُّولِ يُمَدْ. I'm going to stretch the letter of mad with طول, and طول, according to the Qur'an, is the equivalent of 6 harakat, or we say 3 alifs. The second type of mad he describes is وواجب, obligatory mad. إن جاء قبل همزة متصلا إن جمع بكلمة. If the letter of mad comes before a hamza, meaning the letter after the letter of mad is a hamza, متصلا إن جمع بكلمة. It will be called متصل if the hamza and the letter of mad are in the same word. And then finally, وجائز إذا أتى منفصلا. The same thing if the letter of mad after it comes a hamza, it'll be called jaiz if the hamza is separate, meaning it's in the next word. It is not in the same word. أو عرض السكون وقفا مسجلا. Or a sukun appears because of stopping, and musjala meaning generally. Whenever I am stopping on a word and there's a letter of mad, after it is a sukun, but that sukun is only there because I'm stopping. This is a jaiz place. It is permissible for me to do mad in this scenario. Now we'll look at each of these in detail. We said mad lazim is whenever a sukun comes after the letter of mad, and the length of mad is always going to be 6 harakat or 3 alifs. Mad wajib is obligatory. This is where a hamza comes after the letter of mad in the same word, and this is obligatory because all of the qurra agree that you have to do mad here. Mad jaiz is optional mad. This is where the hamza comes after the letter of mad in the next word, and there is the option for mad or no mad according to which qira that you're reciting with. So mad lazim is whenever I have a letter of mad followed by an original sukun, I will stretch this letter of mad beyond its natural length. And take note that the sukun can either be by itself or part of a shadda letter, because every letter with shadda is actually 2 letters. The first one has sukun, the second one has the haraka. Mad lazim is also broken into 2 categories. Ibn al-Jazari doesn't mention them. He just says mad lazim in general because the rule is the same, but we'll mention them just for completeness. Kalimi is that which pertains to regular words like as-sakha, ad-dallin, al-ana. And then the second one is harfi, which only applies to the 14 broken letters at the beginning of surahs. Alif, lam, mim, kaf, ha, ya, ain, sad, and so on. And then both of these are further classified into mukhaffaf and muthaqqal. So an example of mad lazim kalimi is in the word al-ana. I have the alif. After it is a lam with sukun, and the sukun is original, so I stretch this alif for 6 harakat. And because it's a plain sukun, I call it mukhaffaf. In the word as-sakha, I have an alif. After it is an original sukun inside of this shadda letter. So I stretch it for 6 harakat, and this is called muthaqqal because of the shadda. In the letter ha-mim at the beginning of a surah, the meme, if I spell it out, I see there's a ya in the middle, and then there's a sukun on the meme after it. So this is an original sukun, so I stretch this ya in the middle for 6 harakat. In the word ta, sim, meme, same thing is happening. I have a ya, and then there's a meme with a shadda because there's idgham happening. I call this muthaqqal. So I stretch this ya for 6 harakat. Here are some examples of mad lazim kalimi, mukhaffaf, outside of hafs, like in the word wa mahyai wa mamati for qalun. I have the alif, after there's a ya with sukun, original, so I stretch this ya for 6 harakat. In another qira'ah, for example, I have the word ithna, and then the ayn has an original sukun, so I stretch this alif, ithna ashara. right? I have a letter of med and then a sukoon right after it. Regarding the 14 letters at the beginning of the surahs, I have to look at how the letter is spelled. If it's spelled with 3 letters and the middle letter is a letter of med, then I will stretch it for 6 harakat. So I have alif, lam, mim. If I spell alif, I have hamza, lam, fa. There's no med there. If I spell lam, I have lam, alif, and then a mim with sukoon. So I'm going to stretch this. Lam. Then the letter mim, I also spell it with 3 letters. Mim, ya, mim. Mim has a sukoon. I'm going to stretch the ya. Mim. And the same applies for the rest of the broken letters. If I spell it with 3 letters and the middle letter is a letter of med, then I will stretch it for 6 harakat. Med muttasil, we said, is whenever the letter of med is followed by a hamza in the same word. And this med is called wajib because all of the qurra agree that you have to stretch it. You're never allowed to make it short. I cannot ever say وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ. No, because the hamza is in the same word. All of the qurra agree you have to say وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا. In the root of Hafs, reciting from Shatibiyyah, we say that this med is elongated for 4 harakat, and other qurra may stretch it for different lengths according to the qira'ah that you're reciting with. Examples: وَجَاءَكُمُ النَّذِيرُ سُوءَ الْعَذَابِ سِيءَ بِهِمْ. Med munfasil is whenever I have a letter of med followed by a hamza, but not in the same word, but in the word right after it. This type of med is jaiz, it's permissible, and it only occurs when I'm joining to the next word. If I stop on the med letter, then the med will disappear. So this type of med is med jaiz because the qurra differ over whether I have to add med or I don't have to add med. When reading with Hafs from the root of Shatibiyyah, we say this med is the same as med wajib. We're not allowed to make it short. So for example, if I look at here, bima unzila qalu amanna wa fi anfusikum, I'm stretching these letters of med because of the hamza in the next word. If I stopped on the word, I wouldn't stretch. I wouldn't say qalu. I would just say qalu. Only when joining, then I'm going to stretch it. In Surah Kafirun, for example, if I'm reading with Hafs, I would say قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا, and this is actually 2 words, but it's just spelled as 1 word in the Mus'haf. لَا أَعْبُدُ وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ. These are all med munfasil, so they color it in red because I'm reading with Hafs. If I go to a different qira'ah, like Qalun, for example, that's not there anymore, because he would just say قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ لَا أَعْبُدُ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ. I would not stretch this letter of med because it's permissible for me to do qasr, which is just 2 harakah here. Finally, we have al-med al-aarid lis-sukoon, the med that is exposed to a sukoon, and this happens whenever I'm stopping on a word, like for example, mu'minun. I have a waw there, mu'minu, and then when I stop, that noon has a sukoon. So we say because this sukoon has appeared, but it's not original, I can stretch it for 2, 4, or 6 harakat. I can say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Rabbil Alameen, Rabbil Alameen. These are all correct because the sukoon appears after the letter of med, but it's not original. So some examples, if you look in the color Tajweed Mus'haf, أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ. This ya is orange because it's med aarid lis-sukoon. يتيم, مسكين, ساهون, يراؤون, ويمنعون الماعون. In all these cases, I have the letter of med. Right after it is a letter I'm stopping on, so it's exposed to a sukoon, and when stopping on it, I'm allowed to do 2, 4, or 6 harakat. And with that, we've come to the end of today's lesson. We have covered up to verse 72, alhamdulillah. Next week, inshallah, we'll be breaking into the rules of al-waqf wal-ibtida, as well as a rasm of certain words in the Quran, which is also one of the more complex chapters in the poem. And then after that, we will end off with the rules of starting and stopping on certain words in the Quran. Jazakumullah khairan, and we will see you guys next week, inshallah.